Hey everyone, for today's One Piece TCG video, we're going to be constructing a deck for the blue leader Doflamingo. By pulling the strings in more ways than one, Doflamingo has connections both by being a warlord and in the underworld. Use these connections in order to call forth powerful allies and summon them to the field in order to aid you in battle. Having strong abilities, your allies are very easily adapt to any situation thrown at them. Now, let's cause some chaos and pull the strings with Doflamingo. First off, let's talk about our leader. With 2 Dawn attached, and when attacking, you can rest 1. Then you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a Warlord card of 4 cost or less, you may play it onto the field rested. This allows us to get characters out onto the field earlier on in the game, as well as cheat 4 cost characters out for lower value. We need to be able to successfully set up this ability, so next we're going to move on to the first card that's a staple, which is Perona. Typically a first turn play, you're going to rest 1 to play Perona, and on play you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and rearrange them in any order. This allows us to set up the proper warlord that we want to play with our leader Doflamingo's ability. Be careful when setting up the order as to not disrupt it when drawing cards. I will demonstrate later on in the video how to do this. Next up is 3 cost Doflamingo with blocker. With 4000 power, this character has an on-play ability which does the exact same thing as Perona, allows you to look at the top 5 cards and rearrange them in any order. This card gives us another chance to set up our leader Doflamingo's ability in order to play warlords with his effect. With the added blocker ability, it also has the capability of protecting the card that you play on the field with your leader's ability. Much like the last 2 cards, this next one is a staple. 4 cost Boa Hancock with 5000 attack. She has blocker, and when you have 1 Dawn attached, when attacking or blocking, if you have 5 or less cards in hand, you may draw a card. This will help replenish your hand as you'll be using a lot of counter cards in this deck, as a lot of characters cost 4 or greater, and you will be attaching a lot of Dawn for either leader Doflamingo or other characters. Next, we move on to characters that we can include any amount of, or might not necessarily be staple characters. First is Centimaru. Centimaru is a 3 cost character with 4000 power, and when you attach 1 Dawn, you can rest 2 in order to look for a Pacifista from your deck and play it onto the field. This is important not only to give us an additional character on the field, but give us the advantage to know what cards we have in our life at that point in time. Any additional information helps. Next, I personally like to run both Pacifistas. The 4 cost 6000 with 1000 counter, and the 4 cost 5000 with blocker. I run both in case I need the extra power or in case I need the extra blocker. Because we are playing a lot of Pacifistas, I will be running Bartholomew Kuma, which is a 4 cost 5000 with a 1000 counter and blocker, and on KO, you can play a Pacifista from your hand. This allows us to either A, play another blocker onto the field to protect us from attack, or potentially play attacker, which can then attack on our next turn. We can even use our leader Doflamingo's ability to play this card rested and get our opponent to potentially attack this card in order to get out another card onto the field with this ability. Next up is Geckomoria. With 4 cost 5000, 1000 counter, and when on your turn you have 5 or more cards in hand, it gains double attack. This card becomes an easy target, especially when using your leader's ability as it is played rested. If you are able to land a hit with this character, you can easily turn the tides of the game by taking 2 of your opponent's life. Next up, and one of my favorite cards in this deck, is Dracula Mihawk. With 4 cost 5000 and a 2000 counter, you can attach 1 Dawn and draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. This can allow you to set up multiple combos, especially looking for cards such as Perona or Doflamingo to set up for your leader's ability or get the right set of cards you need in order to play for future turns. Next, we're going to move on to the first event card I run in this deck, and that is Love Beam. For 2 cost with counter, one of your leaders or characters gets plus 4000, and if you have 3 cards or less, you get to draw a card. This allows us to replenish our hand for more defense or to get more ability power for characters such as Geckomoria. Not only that, but we might just find the right character we need to end the battle. The next card we're going to look at is Desert Spada. 1 cost with counter, you get plus 2000, and you get to look at the top 3 cards, rearranging them in any order, which benefits our leader's ability, as well as with trigger, you get to draw 2 cards and discard one. It has defensive capabilities as well as sets up for offensive. Next, let's take a look at some cards you might want to consider playing in your Doflamingo deck. First off is the 4-cost 2000 Jinbe with on play, return a 3-cost or lower character to the bottom of your opponent's deck, and a trigger which allows you to play this card. With a lot of cards that have early game threat, or even a lot of low-cost blockers, this card can turn the tides of the game. Although this Jinbe is not a warlord and you cannot use your leader's ability to play them, you can play it from your hand very easily for 4 or get it with a trigger effect, thus causing your opponent to have to make a split-second decision, potentially changing their turn. The next card is the 9-cost Dracula Mihawk for 9,000, and on play, return a 7-cost or lower to the bottom of your opponent's deck. This card can get rid of some of your opponent's heavy late-game hitters. This can also get rid of some strong blockers that are hard to get through. Not only that, this will be hard to defend against as well. Those are the individual cards. Now let's take a look at how many I run of each. First off is 4 Perona and 4 Doflamingo. This greatly improves our chances of starting with one of them in our hand and being able to rearrange the top 5 cards of our deck in the early game. Next is 4 Boa Hancock. This card is a strong blocker as well as attacker and is very situational. I then run 4 Centimaru, which allows us to cheat the Pacifistas out onto the board as well as give us that additional information in terms of what cards may or may not be in our life. This card can come in handy because we might need that additional attacker as well as blocker. With that being said, let's move on to the Pacifistas. I'm going to run 3 of the vanilla Pacifista with 6,000 attack and 3 of the blocker Pacifista to make sure there's an even distribution. This makes the likelihood of them showing up in my deck greater without overloading my deck with Pacifistas and making sure they don't show up in my life. Next up, let's move on to the next warlord. This one is Bartholomew Kuma. On KO, you get to play a Pacifista from your hand. This is important because we are running 6 of them, so the likelihood of one showing up in your hand is very great, as well as it's a 5,000 blocker. You can defend against a lot of attacks, and you may be able to defend your Bartholomew Kuma against that attack as well. Next up, I'm going to be running 3 Geckomorias. This card is very powerful, but it does become a high priority target for your opponents. Because it is high priority, your opponent is most likely going to take it out early on, so that's why I run 3. Next up, I'm going to be looking at Dracula Mihawk, and this is the 4-cost 5,000. I do run 4 of these because it's the only 2,000 counter I run in this deck, and because its ability is strong. This is a great situational card, being great to play from your leader's ability, great to play from hand, as well as a great counter. Next up, I run 3 Love Beams. This is not an event-heavy deck, but I still run a few either way, and I'm going to also run 3 Desert Spadas. The Love Beam is for the additional defense as well as drop power, and the Desert Spada is for the early game defense and rearranging the top cards of your deck. Next up, I'll be running 4 Boa Hancocks. I run this Boa because of her trigger. It's a 3-cost 1,000, and when you take damage from your life, you get to play this card onto the field. Through Centimaru's ability, you can determine whether Boa Hancock is in your life zone and whether or not it would be smart to take any additional damage to reveal them onto the field. This is a personal choice of mine. Another option would be is to play the 1-cost Law that has blocker instead. Next up, I play the 4-cost Jinbe. I run this card at 4, and the reason for that is it's very strong to get a 3-cost or lower character to the bottom of your opponent's deck. Whether or not this is played from trigger, this is very strong card removal, as it does not allow your opponent to get the card back to their hand, being able to use it as a counter, or potentially playing it on their next turn. This is even stronger if your opponent used all their Dawn on the last turn, and then you then play this card in order to get rid of the card that they played. Following up Jinbe is the 9-cost Mihawk, which I'll be running at 2. With 9,000 power, this card essentially does the same thing. Being able to put those 7 characters to the bottom of your opponent's deck means this is a heavy threat card. Next up, I run 1 Arlong. I always run this in my blue decks at 1 because if I come up with a deck that runs a lot of event cards, this card can be used to my advantage. Not only that, it's a 4-cost with 5,000, which means it's an attacking threat, and I can also use it as a counter. Now we've seen the cards, how do we play them? Let's take a look at some plays. Say we rest 1 to play Perona. We're going to then look at the top 5 cards. We get a Boa Hancock, a Dracula Mihawk, a Centimaru, a Desert Spada, and a Doflamingo. We need to set them up in an order for our second turn, so that way when we attach the 2 Don to Doflamingo, we can attack and get a Warlord card onto the field. First, we're going to have to draw a card because it's the first step in the game. Second, we want to play a card that's going to be beneficial to us, so we're going to want to play Boa Hancock. Then, we need to decide what we want to draw on our next turn, which is going to be Desert Spada. Then, we're going to want to set up to play Doflamingo next, because then we can rearrange the next 5 cards. You need to be able to ladder your cards in a way that you're able to plan for multiple turns ahead, so that way you can use your leader's ability and plan multiple steps. We then attach the 2 Don, rest 1, and play Boa Hancock. Keep in mind that this card comes in rested, and that you have enough cards in hand to protect it, so that way you have it available for next turn. Keep in mind your opponent will view this card as a threat, so protect it. Our next play is not Warlord specific, but it will help out this deck. We're going to play Centimaru for 3, attach 1 Don, and rest 2 in order to be able to search our deck and able to find what's in our life. With this, we'll be able to gain valuable information to aid us in our battle. You need to be able to look through your deck as quickly as possible and play the Pacifista at the same time. So remember what the card that you're looking for that could be in your life is, as well as how many you run to make it as easy as possible to find. Once you've found the information you're looking for, play the Pacifista and then shuffle your deck. Keep in mind the card you're looking for doesn't guarantee the spot it is in your life zone. And lastly, let's take a look at a good starting hand. First, we want a Perona in our hand in order to set up our leader's ability. With having a Perona in our starting hand, we can have some diversity among the other cards, but there is some optimal choices in what to have. For example, having Centimaru in your opening hand allows you to play Pacifistas from your deck, as well as searching to find out what may or may not be in your life. A 3-cost Doflamingo sets up for a block, as well as allows you to search the top 5 cards to set up your leader's ability again. We're going to want some strong Warlords in our hand as well, so you might want a Geckomoria for that double attack. Next, you may want some late game capabilities, so you might want one of your 2 Mihawks in your hand as well. If you don't get these last 2 cards, don't worry, it's not a big deal. Instead, let's see what else we could look for. Instead, if you get in your hand potentially a 4-cost Boa Hancock, so you can play this to the field instead of searching for it with your leader's ability, as you can attach the Don and block with it. Or potentially a 4-cost Bartholomew Kuma, so that way you can play it as well, and then potentially get that Pacifista from your hand. You could also exchange one of those 2 cards for an event card such as Love Beam to get that defensive capability as well as draw power. In the end, you're going to want to look for Perona or Doflamingo to start with in order to set up your leader's ability. Once again, thank you so much everyone for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed my Doflamingo deck tech. Leave a comment down below on what strategy you may play instead, or what's a card you may change. Thanks again.